Today we're going to make Amy, and Amy is a cover-up for the beach in this instance, but actually you could make Amy in any fabric you wish, depending on the sort of look that you want. But this is Amy. I'm actually wearing Amy. I'm going to stand up. You'll just see my body and you'll see that it's a fantastic cover-up. It has lovely pom-pom trim just to weigh it down a little bit. You can see how it drapes. We've got like a sort of an armhole effect here. That isn't all open down the side, that is stitched, and we've got a lovely scoopy neckline. Now, it's not very often I make clothes, well, hardly at all. But actually my background is dressmaking. It's like everything else though, we move on to other things, don't we? So this is Amy. I've really enjoyed making her. The original one, which you'll see in the video for Annie, was from about 3-4 years ago when I made it for a magazine that never did get to be published because the magazine folded, and that was it. So I thought, you know what, it's such a great design. It's so useful, and I've used it myself a lot of times on holidays just to put over your shoulders, maybe, you know, in air conditioning and you want something to sort of keep your shoulders warm, really. But also you can roll these up so small and pop them into your bag. Now the bags either side of me, you know, is Amy, and of course you know how useful these are going to be, and of course Amy can fit beautifully inside the Annie bag. Too many A's, too many names. So I'm going to show you today how to make Amy. It's actually quite easy, but because the nature of the fabric is because the original one, this one is polyester voile, I'm going to use a cotton voile so you can see the difference between the two. The essence of this particularly is that it's a very sheer, lightweight, floaty fabric, and that's why the pom-pom trim at the bottom helps, because it kind of weighs it down a little bit. But you could add a braid trimming if pom-pom is not your thing. I totally understand that. Maybe a tiny little tassel, think about that, but also maybe a beautiful ribbon braid, something very decorative. It's funny, I was watching Tula Pink this morning with her new ribbons and braids and webbings that she has, and I thought, my goodness me, one of those ribbons along the bottom would look amazing, because I'm going bright and colourful. You may not, but there are hundreds and hundreds of different types of voiles that you can use. But you could always use cottons, you could use tweed, you could use, well, I was going to say satin, but maybe not satin. Velvets, a beautiful crushed velvet version of this would be absolutely incredible if you're going on a cruise. This one I'm using today is a batik cotton voile. So again, it's still very lightweight, not as lightweight as the polyester, but it's still lightweight. So consequently, in the summer months, it actually would have a very cooling effect on you. So to go straight into the pattern making, like I said, if you're going to use polyester voile, or silk is another fabulous option, it's incredibly slippery. You need a big table to be able to take all of the fabric. It's a case of supporting it and holding on to it. It'll slip everywhere. So I've come up with a plan of what might be easier for you. So if we look on the overhead, you'll be able to see that I've got my cotton voile rolled up, ready to show you what this looks like. You'll notice that first of all, it's folded in half, like this. Secondly, I've already trimmed. So this measurement from the fold out to the raw edge here is a definite measurement, and that's in the pattern. So fold the length of your fabric in half. Now, I would strongly suggest do not use directional fabric. The front will be either upside down or the back will be upside down. So use a design like this where it's very free-flowing. This batik is just super. So the fold is here, the raw edges are here. We've got the two layers on top of each other, and I've already cut this, so we've got a head start. But prior to cutting that edge, I have pinned about every 8 inches, all of the layers to support the fabric. It keeps my edges absolutely beautifully neat and clean. In other words, they're not slipping about, because by golly it will. But also it's easier for cutting. Use a flat head pin if you can, because you might use a ruler to cut your fabric with. You may not, but use a flat. And also a quilting pin is quite good, but you need to use a fine pin. These aren't the finest in the world, but they're fine with the cotton. With the polyester voile, I really suggest you use something like the Taylor Seville fine pins. They are incredibly thin and sharp. You do not want to nick this fabric. This isn't so bad, but the polyester, you don't want to nick it. It'll pull all the threads. So that's just my little tip, that you use really fine pins. So you can see what I've done. Now I have used the entire length of the piece of fabric I've bought. I've suggested you get 2 meters. You could even go bigger. It depends on your height. I'm only 5'4". This is perfect for me. If you're 6 foot, it'll be a little bit shorter, perhaps coming up more towards your hip. But you can always lengthen it just by using more length of your fabric. So please bear that in mind. Like clothing is such a minefield, but with this it's pretty generic. It'll also fit quite a large chest as well, and I'll put that in the pattern so you know what size this particular clothing, this bit of cover up, will go to, but it will fit a large chest because of the width we're using, and you'll see as we go along where we're stitching the armholes, or the faux armholes really. Anyway, let's go back to the overhead. So you can see as I unroll, I'm good as my word, we've got the pins going across. Use more if you need to. I found 3 enough, but 4 perhaps. At least 8 inches apart. You don't want to put loads of pins in, but you do want to support your fabric. And then at the bottom, if we get to the bottom, this could be the back or the front, it matters not. I've already trimmed the bottom here. I've already got my ruler and my rotary cutter and done the most amazing straight cut. Obviously you could use scissors, but we're going to use the overlocker serger on our garment today. You can use your machine. I'll show you a couple of things that you can do with the machine, but you want it to be as straight as possible to go through your overlocker, only because with a rolled hem stitch it doesn't cut the fabric. We don't want to cut the fabric with the overlocker, we only want to stitch it. So it's important that your seams, if you like, your outside edges are as straight as they can be. Now I haven't cut the bottom. Now the bottom is a particular measurement as well, so I'm going to bring my fabric up and fold it in half. Now I'm going to try and do it so you can see. I'll just move my overlocker a little bit out of the way. I'm going to turn this on the side. Now if you've got a big mat like me, this is perfect because I can measure this absolutely perfectly. Just get any cables out of the way because we'll use the rotary cutter. And in the pattern it tells you exactly the length you want to cut. Now obviously I've got far too much fabric here. Now on the end here, let me just show you. I'll just move it in. This end here is right on the edge of my mat where I'm going to measure. Okay, so I'm putting it up to the 0 line. I can't zoom out anymore, so you've got to trust me that my fabric literally is on the edge of my cutting mat. I'm then going to bring this great length of fabric over the top and fold it into a quarter. So we've got like 2 halves. This is the wrong side of the fabric we've got here. If you go inside and look at the right side of the fabric, it's far more vibrant, it's beautiful. And for a batik, funnily enough, it does have a right and wrong. So if I just move this up so you can see what I'm doing. So I folded it in half again. So this is my bottom half. Let me move this along a little bit so you can see. This is my bottom half here. And now I'm bringing the other half over. So I've folded it into quarters now, and we will get, I'm going to just get this pretty much as I want it. So yeah, I'm happy with that. Now you can't see, but what I've done is I've folded this into quarters. I'll do it like that, which means that this is the center of my cover up. And this is where we'll put the template. Now, I don't know if you can see, but there's a pin there. So we've got to be aware that we've got pins everywhere. So if you're using a rotary cutter, when you come to cut this part here, you'll want to remove these pins. And there could be some on this side as well. So just be cautious, But this I've found to be the best method. So once you've got your fabric folded into quarters and you've got the exact measurement that you need, it's actually half. I'm going to roll this up so you can see. Let's bring it in. I'll try and get it as flat as I can. There we go. So right at the bottom here, we need extra widescreen TV with this. If I bring that back, this is correct. So this edge here is exactly the right width from the top fold down. And this is where I'm going to cut my second piece of fabric. So I'm going to pop that over the top. Now, a couple of things you can do. Just sort of keep it all nice and straight. You could measure from there to the edge of your fabric. This will all be different for everybody, because you might have got 2.5 meters. This is the length of the fabric we're working on here. Across here is the width folded. So I need it to be there, but what I can do is use my big rotary, my ruler and my rotary cutter to go nearly all the way across. It won't, I don't think it might go all the way. Yeah, it will. And so if I get my ruler in, I can lay this over the top. I can line up one of my straight edges here, and I know when I cut that, that'll be perfect. So you mustn't worry. I know you will, because this is something perhaps unfamiliar territory to you. Perhaps what you want to do also is to get this underneath piece out of the way so we don't accidentally cut that. That would be, because they get folded, don't they? They get folded, the fabric gets folded. So I'm just going to bring this towards me. I'm going to stand up and get my rotary cutter in. Got to be careful because I've got Millie the dog right on top of me. And I'm just going to move it slightly, and then I'm going to cut. So don't forget, I've got this parallel, if you like, I've got a 90-degree angle going on here. I think that's as best as you'll get, because I don't know if you can see, but this has been cut by the shop, and that is such a bad cut. So I'm not relying on this edge at all. You could trim it and then measure all the way along. You can get your tape measure out and think, okay, so it needs to be, 14 inches, 14 inches, 14 inches, 14 inches. And we're going to do a lot of measuring and pinning, because with voile, it's very difficult to do anything other. So we're just going to go zooming across. So although this seems very scary, it's absolutely not. Be careful of any pins. There's a pin there. So just be careful of any pins. There's a pin there. You don't want to blunt your rotary cutter. But you do get a lovely straight edge. So it's ideal using a cutter. Okay, so let's just have a look. There we go. So there's my little bit of waste fabric. Now, if you're feeling very brave, you could, if you wanted to, make your bias binding out of the same fabric. And I say very brave because it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to make bias out of a voile. Trust me on that. But by all means try. By all means try. And all you're going to do is fold it on a right angle like that. Put your straight edge on here, and then you're going to cut, move, cut, move and you'll get your bias. So by all means try that, but yeah, it's not so easy. So let me just get my scrap out of the way. So now when we bring this piece in, let's go back to, let's fold our corners. So this is the folded edge I've got here. Just going to move my fabric. So if we look at the front, there we are, there's my piece, but this is now in 4s, okay, or a quarter. So what you see is a quarter of the fabric, and this here are where all the folds are. So that's what we're going to work on next. It sounds really complicated. It's not. It's because we're using one large piece of fabric, and you just need to control the fabric. And I found this to be the best method. There's diagrams actually in the pattern which are quite clear on how you measure and how you fold and how you cut. So do refer to those diagrams, but certainly working in a confined space, it's not so easy. Right, so let's have a quick look at what we're going to do next. So looking at the overhead, here we go. So there's my folded 4 layers of fabric. So this could be the front and this could be the back, okay? And you've got a template in the pattern that looks, well, it's a bit weird looking, looks like half a spaceship. And this actually sits like that, but we need to open up the fabric to enable us to cut this neckline out. Please don't be frightened. It's a lovely big piece of fabric, and I know you're going to worry terribly about cutting into it, but I want you to be really brave. So just don't forget that you've got equal distance, if you like, from top to bottom on both sides. Nothing is different. We've got the full width here. If I bring it in like that, it's the full width out. Everything is lying on top of each other, all parallel. It's all looking beautiful. So in the pattern, I said to you, want to be able to find this center mark, this center point. Let's bring it in so you can see. Now you could, if you wanted to, use a pen. You're not going to see that, but I can. So that is your center bit there, really, where it goes right up to the point there. To be honest, if you're a few millimeters out with this, I wouldn't give it another thought. The other thing you can do is pop a pin in. So we can pop a pin in right on that fold there. Don't forget to use your very fine pins if you've got any. I do strongly suggest you get some. And so I've put my pin in there, so I know that where that pin is, it's not where I've pinned it, it's not the center, but it is just at the beginning of that bit there. So I know that. You'll be able to recognize that. The other thing you could do is to actually snip. So you could, if you wanted to, snip the corner off. There, you've done it. You snipped the corner off. You could snip into it, you can make a little nick, but that's going to be your point of reference, right? I want you to make this. I want you to be happy with it. So this is why it seems like, oh my gosh, there seems to be such a lot to do. Now I'm going to turn this around because I want you to see that I've still got all my pins in. Looks amazing, doesn't it? So I've got my pins in, so everything is still being held together. That's really important, especially if you're using a voile, the polyester particularly. So I'm going to move this pin and I'm going to pop it there. Okay, so there's our notch. Let me move that. Well, in fact, let's pop that over the top and you can see. So there's our notch. And you can see how I've butted up the pattern pieces. So if I bring it up, you'll be able to see that I've butted them up. And it says on here, tape together here by butting up both pieces. If you wanted a smaller neckline, maybe you could overlap those a bit. But with this particular top, and if we look at the front here, we want it to be sloppy. We want it to be relaxed. It's not so wide that it's going to show your underwear. I would suggest you wear another top underneath, a camisole, swimming costume if you're at the beach, because this is sheer. But it's not a bad neckline, and I think you'll find it very, very, very comfortable. So let's go back to this again. So there's our notch, okay, and we're going to put this line here up to the notch. Okay, so we're going, this is the center here, and I'm just going to bring it in and place that over the top. Now, you could pin this, you could draw around this, you could use your spray glue to hold that in place. Whatever you do, you want to make sure that none of this slips. So pins are good. So what we can do is we can borrow some of these pins that we've got. Now I wriggle my pins in to make sure that my layers stay put, because they have a habit of even more wriggly. So again, and we're going through the tape here, so just wriggle it, make sure everything stays flat. Keep the fabric as flat as you can on your desk, especially if you're using polyester. I will keep going on about that, because if you've never used it before, you're in for a treat. But it's it's a difficult fabric. It's not difficult, it's just slippery. It's just slippery, that's all. So look, what you'll notice is I've kept all these pins in to stabilize my layers, to keep my layers from not shifting, because they'll move around at peculiar angles, and you'll think, what the heck, I never cut it like that. Well, it's because none of this was stabilized, pinned together. So I know I'm harping on about this a bit, but if you do this, if you do exactly what I've said, you will not go wrong. Now, if you want to and feel brave, you could use your rotary cutter. I don't recommend it. Use your best, sharpest dressmaking scissors. These are slightly serrated, perfect, because they're going to grip your slippery fabric. Serrated scissors have been designed to grip slippery fabric. So, and they are fine. They're not like a pinking shear. They are serrated, and they hold the fabric as you're cutting. They're quite genius, really. Or if you haven't got a serrated pair of scissors, use your sharpest pair and your biggest pair, because you're going to cut in one fell swoop. If I used, let's have a look. These are particularly sharp scissors, my little Fiskars here, but hopeless for cutting a really neat line in this fabric on a curve. So put those to one side. So I'm just going to stand up. And so just position yourself so you're comfortable, and we're doing long cuts. If you go a little bit outside of your pattern piece, oh my gosh, please don't worry. This is the most forgiving pattern in the whole world. And actually, if you make one, you will make a dozen, I promise. And it's not hugely expensive. So you can see I'm taking my time. I'm supporting the fabric with my left hand. I'm not pulling, I'm just supporting. And I'm just coming round to the curve. Now you don't particularly want a point here, you want a curve. So try and get it so you've cut a nice curve. So there's our pattern piece taken out. Put that to one side now. And let's bring that back. Okay, so we still want to know that that's the middle. And this is the middle of the back. So this shallow piece here, in fact, let's have a look. So on the template, it says neckline front and neckline back. And if we put it back, there's a reason why I'm telling you. So I want you to get one of your pins now, and I want you to just pop that. And in fact, let's do it that way. So I know that is the center of my back. Because the one thing you want to try and do, and this is entirely your choice now, is to put a label here or a loop of ribbon so you know that's the back when you go and slip it on. It doesn't matter if that goes on the front and this is the back, it doesn't really matter, but it might be something that you want to make sure you get right. So now we're going to remove all the pins. So let's just do that really as quick as we can. And obviously you can put them back into their container or their pin cushion. These are pins that I very rarely use. I'll just throw them to one side. But I wanted flat pins, flat-headed pins, because I was using my rotary cutter and my ruler to do the cutting of the side seams, etc. So leave that pin in at the neck. We don't want to take that one out, not at the moment anyway. So let's take all these out. So I think the only problem you're going to have here is you need to work near a dining room table or a big farmhouse kitchen table, maybe a kitchen worktop if it's big enough. If you've got one of those island units, probably perfect at this stage because the amount of fabric we're using. Okay, so if we open up the fabric, let's just see, let's just have a quick look. Actually, to be honest, I think this is the front, and yeah, it's much more faded here. You perhaps couldn't see that. So I've got my right side facing me. It really doesn't matter. So we're going to open this up now. Hopefully I've taken all the pins out. And this is the neck line we've just created, and when you go to lay it down like I'm doing here, it will move around. There's my pin, so I'm just going to move that. I'm going to pop it back in again. So don't forget, this is the right side, okay? If you wanted to, you could just curve that a little bit more, but I wouldn't worry. We're going to pop it under the overlocker, so you can see how that looks, neatens it off. Putting the neckline under the overlocker stabilizes the fabric. This is all about keeping the fabric stable. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to overlock all of the edges, all the two bottom hem lines and the sides, and we're going to overlock this piece here. But what I really want to do is to keep that mark. So I think what I'm going to do is put a pen mark in, and then when I've finished overlocking with my rolled hem facility, I know that that's the middle. I think this is quite important because I've got a little label, and this label goes on the inside, so we will end up turning this over, and I want it to be absolutely in the middle. So that's why I want that mark there to be right in the middle. So the next stage, we're going to use the overlocker. So got my overlocker here, Serger, if you're in the US. I've got it on the 3 reels of thread because I'm going to do a 3-thread rolled hem. Now, I cannot tell you how to use your own machine. So to do a rolled hem on your Serger overlocker, please look at your instruction manual. But also have a little practice. Don't launch yourself straight into this project. Use your offcuts that you've just trimmed off the length to actually practice. I'm very lucky. I've got a super duper baby lock machine here that I don't have any bother with, touch wood. What we're going to do is we're going to overlock on the right side of the fabric. It doesn't matter really, but that's just how I've always done it, so that's how we'll do it today. Now you'll start off with a tail, and all of this is good. So you'll start off with a tail on your overlocker, which you should always have, and also at the end of each section, so whether it's the front hem, the back hem, or all round the sides, you want to finish with a long tail, because that's what you can use to neaten off, to use the threads on that tail just to bury into your work. On some of them, they're going to be cut. Using an overlocker is a whole different ball game, and I'm not here today to teach you how to use your overlocker, merely to make the project. And I know I don't do it very often, but like I say, they're a minefield because they are all different. So we're not going to use the blade. That's the one thing about a rolled hem, and certainly with this we're not going to use the blade. So you want to be able to stitch right up to the edge. So we're only using the one needle, so we want to make sure that our needle is just inside the fabric, because the outside edge is going to be rolled over with stitching. And this is why we cut with a rotary cutter, because you really want a nice straight edge there to actually put through your machine. So although this is such a lovely easy project, it's one of those things where it's going to teach you to get that overlocker out, to dust it off, to set it on the rolled hem facility and just have a go. It's not going to break and you're not going to be made poorly by using it. So we're just going to go for it now. So make sure you're comfortable. This is at a slightly different angle for me, because obviously I need to show you from this angle here. You won't be able to see the needle, but you'll be able to see me at least start off going through the process of doing this. So lift up the front of your foot. Because we haven't got the blade, you need to pop that fabric just that little bit further in. So lift up the front of the foot. You should be able to do that on all overlockers. Don't lift up this part, don't lift up your whole foot, just the front, just so it catches that fabric, and then we're just going to go for it. So we're going on the front and we're using a rolled hem, 1 needle, 3 threads. Not easy to say. So take your time. What I do is, when I'm using my machine, we can't see very much from this angle, I tend to line it up with a mark on my foot. So you might find a line on your foot that you can visually line up to, which will help you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten up my machine so it's better for me, and then I'm going to whiz all the way around. But if I show you, if you come in close here, hopefully you'll be able to see that it makes a really lovely neat edge, and we'll have a closer look at that when we're finished. But I'm going to show you a couple of other ways on my sewing machine. So I'll go away and do all of this. So we're doing top and bottom hems and the sides all the way around as well. So there's a lot of stitching, and then you'll come back and we'll do the neckline together. So I've been all the way around all 4 edges of my piece, and every single piece has now been rolled hem on my overlocker. It looks amazing. I'm going to go to the side camera now, because I want to show you something that's that may sort of rouse your curiosity, if you like. So there is the rolled hem from the side camera angles, you can see, and you can see how neat it is. It needs a press because it's slightly wrinkled. Can you see? You can't adjust, well, on my machine you can't adjust the tension, it is what it is, but it does the perfect seam. It just needs a little bit of an iron just to flatten it out. At this corner here, and I wanted you to see this, the overlocking didn't start right where I'm going to try and get it so you can see. This overlocking didn't start exactly where I wanted it to be. So this is where I snipped off the threads. Not easy to see. I'll try and do it so you can see it. Let's put it on the white here, that might be better. So this is where I snipped off the long threads to be able to start my next seam. And can you see it started, well, a good ½ an inch in. It's not always easy to get a fabric as sheer as this directly under your needle, so you start from here. So most times you can, but this time it didn't, and I wanted you to see that because that might happen to you. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to couch that down. Now I've got some thread on my needle. It's quite a big needle, but you want to use a fine needle if you can. I'm going to just pop my needle in where it joins the fabric, where the stitching actually joins. I'm using obviously the same coloured thread, and then I'm just going to work along that hem there just to make sure that it is couched down. I'm kind of going to be doing a blanket stitch just to hold it. And it makes that little corner there a little bit neater. You could, if you wanted to, undo the threads on that tail and just use 1 or even 2 of those threads to do exactly the same as what I'm doing now. I do suggest you use a finer needle, but I'm literally doing a blanket stitch using all that thread just to neaten it, just to keep the continuity of the stitching, because you don't want a raw edge. You just don't. It'll look like you've done a rush job, and you don't want that. You want it to look beautiful. The other thing is, if you're not using any trim on your hem, then obviously you want to make sure that is a nicely finished corner as well. So there we go. Now if I cut the long thread off, which is this overlocking thread here, let's just cut that away. That will now stay nice and neat on that corner. We just need to sort of do a knot here just to neaten it off. Let's just try and get my needle in. I'm using the biggest needle, honestly. You don't need a big needle like this. So that's how you would finish off. You would either use your overlocking threads, or you would use something like that where you're couching those threads down so it looks like it's been overlocked. Okay, so with all of these corners neatened, and you might just want to snip the threads. It could be, that corner, if I show you on the side camera again, that corner worked out to be perfect. You can see what it looks like, and you could, if you wanted to, just snip that away. If you're using a trim, all of that's going to be stitched in place anyway, so it depends on how you feel about it. If it's not going to have a trim, depending on the weight, then first of all you perhaps want to do a different technique than rolled hem, but also you might just think that that's perfectly acceptable to leave it just as it is. And I think it's a neat enough sort of job. So go round all of those corners just to make sure you're happy with them all. I haven't looked at mine yet, but they're all fine, apart from that one, and I wanted you to show you that. So as you come to the end of a seam that you've overlocked, this time you would cut the thread close, and then you would start your overlocking again. So you're kind of locking in that edge. Yeah, all good, all good. So now that we've done the front hem, back hem, all the way around the sides, we want to do the neckline. Now you might say, well, you haven't got a starting off point. With the overlocker, you're quite right, you need to slip your fabric in. And I know this is my neckline. Okay, you can see that's my neckline, and I've just slipped an edge underneath. And what I've done is I've lifted up my presser foot so I can get that edge underneath. When we come to finish, you're just going to pull it off at an angle and run that thread off like you normally would. But this is a great way of starting. I'm going to try and do it at this funny angle just for you for a moment. And we're going to neaten that edge off again because it stabilizes the fabric. So try not to make sure any of this is caught on your lap. So let's see how we get on. So keep adjusting. So don't forget you're going around curves. So I'm just keeping my eye on where the fabric is on my foot here. I'm not sure how we're doing, but we'll have a look in a minute. But this is not crucial because you're not going to see any of it. So if you miss a little bit, or if a little bit gets too ruffled, it doesn't matter so much. So take your time on this because we're working with curves. Also try not to stretch because we're using curves. You might be tempted to stretch that, so try not to. So we're coming up to the side bit here, and I know that because it's a fairly, it's not an angle, but it's definitely a difference. You can see on the machine bed, it's definite kink, but that shouldn't make any difference on an overlocker. You just literally straighten it out. I'm just trying to get my fabric. You've got to support this fabric all the time. even with this cotton voile, it's not slippery, but there's no substance to it, so it's featherweight, almost featherweight. So stitching at an angle, this isn't so bad. I'm surprised. But I am keeping an eye on this fabric here. Oops, I might come off a little bit there. Let's move it. Okay, so let's get rid of this tail. We're not cutting the fabric, see? We're not using our blade, so I have to be the one that cuts. Whereas normally on the overlocker, the blade cuts and it's super. So we'll just finish that off. Ooh, I'm a bit close to the edge there. That's it. And then to bring it off the machine, I'm just literally, you can see, and you always want that lovely long tail, always. And then if we look at the side, oh look, I missed a bit there, I thought I had, and that's how your finish is going to look. And you see, let's try and do that. Got a little tail there. We'll snip that off as we go. This little bit here that I missed, we could go in again and do that again, but actually we're going to put the binding on, so I'm just going to leave that as it is, because now we've stabilized this curve. Now it's not going to stretch out of place. I've done the job that I wanted to do, and that's to stabilize the fabric. So okay, so we're going to move to the sewing machine now. We've got a little bit of work now to do the armholes, or just bringing together the fabrics on the side. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and we're going to do the neck binding as well. So I'm going to move all my equipment back in. So I've moved the beast in. There's a couple of things I want to show you about how you can finish off your front, back hems and your side seam hems. Instead of doing the rolled hem on an overlocker, you may well not have an overlocker. However, you might have a foot that allows you to do a rolled hem. Now, this is absolutely not a strength of mine. It's something that I would absolutely shy away from. But if you have got a rolled foot on your with your sewing machine, you might as well try it out. I've never found this to be the most easiest piece of equipment to use. The actual foot itself, I might be able to see, if I take it off and bring it up to the camera, you'll be able to see what it looks like. So it has like a little sort of, well, it's a rolled piece of metal, and do get the right piece. And what it allows you to do is feed the fabric in that way, so from the right to the left, and it folds that fabric around as you're stitching, and so giving you that rolled hem effect. I've never found them to be very accurate. I certainly can't start a rolled hem right from the corner, let's say. So I would say, yes, if you've got one, have a play. Some people would be really good at it. I had a colleague that was absolutely a whizzo with a rolled hem foot. I am not. I'm more than happy to hold my hand up saying, I'm going to use my overlocker. But what I will do in the resources part of the pattern, I will find a fantastic YouTube tutorial where somebody else has shown you how to use your rolled hem foot. Okay, so I'm not even going to try and attempt. I'm going to let the experts do it. And in all my years of stitching, I have never used a rolled hem foot, and I used to work with the finest of voiles and silks, and it was just not necessary. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways that we can do make a difference, let's say. So I'm using my scrap of voile to show you how we can do that. So just a little piece so you can show you. I'm not going to do it on my garment because we're already done. So the first thing you need to do is, obviously, you're going to cut your piece. You're going to cut your edges once again lovely and straight, and you're going to strengthen the edge of your fabric. This is especially important with polyester. You're going to strengthen, on silk perhaps, strengthen it by stitching. You remember on the rolled hem of the neckline I said the reason why we're doing this is because we're stabilizing the fabric. You're doing exactly the same, except you're going to use our regular machine. So all we're going to do is put our foot down. We're going to go fairly near the edge, I would say 1/8 of an inch. Make sure it feeds through your machine, okay? Make sure it's not catching, but you want to go fairly near the edge. Okay. Now you might say, well, why can't I just turn this over now and just do a fold again sort of hem? Well, you can try, but with polyester it will tell you who's boss. So all we've done is a straight stitch along there just to strengthen it, just to stabilize it, and now that's not going to stretch, or it's so flimsy that it will just go out of shape. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fold that over, and fold it over, and a nice 1/4 of an inch. So that's the sort of fold you're going to do, and stitch again. This time, because your fabric is lovely and stable, it will stay as a fold, as it might not have done before. So foot down, and we're going to stitch a little bit nearer, so be brave. But the fabric is now in a stable situation, and you're going to stitch not quite a 1/16 of an inch, but not far off. So we'll stitch all the way down, and don't worry about measuring this. I mean, you don't want a huge amount. Don't do an inch, otherwise you're going to lose width on your fabric. Okay, so now what you've got is you've got 2 lines of stitching, one on the single layer here and one on the double layer, which is further in. Can you see how that looks? And if we look at the front, all we've got is a line of stitching. Okay, but the next thing you want to do is get your scissors, a nice really super duper sharp pair of scissors, and you want to trim back this as far as you dare. So I would go right up to where I was stitching just before. I'll do a little bit and then I'll show you what I'm doing. So a lovely sharp pair of scissors. If you've got a duckbill pair of scissors, they would be good for this because they can get in between the layers. So I'm going to do just a little bit so you get the idea. So we've trimmed, I mean that's upside down as we did before. Let's do it that way around so you can see. So we've trimmed as far as we dare up to where we've stitched. So now what we've got is a lovely neat folded edge and 1 row of stitching. So now what we're going to do is fold that again, and we're going to stitch again. Now you may think, oh gosh, that's such it's a waste of thread, it's going to take a lot of time. But if you haven't got an overlocker, this is perhaps a much better way of making a mock rolled hem. So we're going to fold it again. Now because we've got all that stitching, we've got the folded edge, you can actually go really tiny. So let's pop it under the machine. I would say use a piece of fabric under your machine to start off with. Don't put your voile directly under your needle. You might have a little bit of a bunching up. I would have a leader and a follower, and if you don't know what that is, look it up. We'll do it some other time. So now I can stitch really quite a small hem. I mean, that's not so small, but I could come right in at 1/8 of an inch. And I'm doing a 2nd row stitching now. That's all I'll do, because you'll get the gist of it. So on the wrong side, let's say, you've got a double layer of stitching. On the right side, you've got a single layer of stitching. okay, and that gives you a beautiful finish, especially for a voile. The other thing you can do, let me get to the other end of this, really simply, is to zigzag that edge, or use an overlock stitch that's on your machine, turn it over once and then stitch. So if we do that, let's put it onto zigzag. So I would say stitch length, let's do it as 1. Stitch width you want to bring right down to, well, let's have a look at 2. But again, don't start right underneath your needle. Move that fabric in, or use a leader just to take that fabric. So now I'm going to zigzag right on the edge of my fabric. You might find you need to adjust and give it a little bit of assistance. You might want a bigger stitch. You can see I'm helping this through. Probably don't need to, but it's just habit, I suppose. That's made a good job of it. I'm just supporting my fabric, really. You could do, I reckon you could do a slightly longer stitch. Let's try. So stitch length of, let's do 1.4. I think you could go up the zigzag width to 2.2. I would say experiment. Definitely. I'm quite happy with this. This looks good. But you're going right on the edge of your fabric. I'll show you. So you've got a few little frayed pieces, but have a look at that. That's not bad at all. That's a slightly wider stitch at the bottom there. But obviously you want to get rid of all these frayed bits here. And then all I would do then is to go back to your regular stitch. Fold this over, do trim those frayed bits away, and then you're just going back to stitching. Because you stabilise that fabric with a zigzag, you could do 1/8 of an inch. So let's just do a little bit, and there we are. Look at that. That's first class, that is. Really lovely. And then on the front, all you're seeing is your straight stitch. Okay, so that again makes a really lovely finish. Bit of zigzagging to neaten off, do trim any frayed bits, turn over and top stitch. Anyway, there we are. Quick lesson in what you can do if you haven't got an overlocker. But we have. Right, so now we're going to put the binding on the neckline. Now the binding, it's bias because we're working with curves. I give you the measurements of how much we use. I've got quite a long length here. Let me show you, let me give you the measurement. I just cut a great big length. So I've got 50 inches. You don't need as much as that. We're going to stitch through both layers at the same time. Now you might not be comfortable with that, so what I suggest you do is stitch from the front, so your front looks amazing but your back maybe misses. Then do a little hand stitch, go over it again, it's not going to notice. But what I tell you what we need to do is we need to put our label in first, which I just nearly forgot about. So if we go on the overhead, oops, and we're going to baste this in place first because then we can forget about it. So let's have a little look. I've got to remember which is back and front. So this is the front. So I really want the back. So let me just push that out the way a little bit. So do you remember we marked it? So if we go on the overhead, so this is changed. This is the front and this is the back. So let's just move that so it makes sense to you. And like I say, you might want to press this or iron it very, very carefully. You want a really low heat just to flatten that stitching out. So this is my wrong side. So my mark should be on this side, and there it is there. You can't see it, but I can. I'm going to pop a pin through so I know exactly, pretty much, where that middle is. There we go. So I'm happy with that. So our label needs to be stitched here, and it needs to be stitched now. So let's just pop that in. And a good idea is always, I'm going to use my lovely fine pins now. A good thing to do is to do this bit first. Okay, so there's one bit pinned. And as I said right at the very beginning, you don't need a label like this. Just a little loop of ribbon right in the centre perhaps is all you need. Just a tiny little bit. You know, don't forget you're doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so you want it to stick out. I would say go for 1/2 inch looped, just a little bit, so you know that that's your back. I haven't got any ribbon to hand, but if we think about it, if we get a little piece of fabric here, let's just show you. You're not going to see it terribly well, but just saying this could be your ribbon. Fold it in half, put it on the seam line like that, pin it, and then just top stitch that, just baste that so it's in place. And by the time you put your binding on, you'll have a little loop of ribbon there. You'll know back and front. I just happen to have this stamp which I used fabric ink onto this sort of tape, and it's perfect. Not great stamping, but that's fine. And it will go through the wash. The one I've had for 3 years, that has still survived with my name on. It's amazing. So we'll just stitch that in place, and then we'll put the binding on. When we do the binding, we're starting with a raw edge. You may want to do that differently, but I'm starting with a raw edge, and I am going to finish with a folded end, and I'm going to encase the whole thing in. So I'm just running a little running stitch now right across. I'm not going over my needles. That's my pin, sorry. It may look like it, but I'm not. That was close. So let's take that out. Because you know we don't stitch over needles. What you want to do is to make sure that when you put your label on, let me just trim that little thread here. That's made a little mess on there. Never mind, that'll be fine. When you stitch your label in, you just want to make sure that you're not going to catch it in that seam allowance as you go round. That's the only thing I'd say to you. So maybe you want the tails of it to be just a little bit longer down, but we should be okay with that. So now we're going to stitch from the front. It's important that we do it from the front so it's super nice and neat. And we're going to start, as I said, with a raw edge. Now what I want you to do, now I've got a bias binder maker, the Simplicity one. Now you may not, but it makes a really good job at creasing the edges. I mean, this is a batik. I kind of figured it would go with my fabric. It's cotton. I'm not using the voile. This is cotton. So I've done my bias like I normally would through the machine, and then I folded it manually and then fed it through the machine again. And that has given me a really super duper crispy folded over piece of bias binding. Still got the stretch. It's important for accuracy that you have this super edge to edge, gorgeous folded piece, really crispy, so it sits nicely on your work and you'll catch back and front. I'm not going to guarantee it because we're all different, but theoretically that should be fine. So I'm just going to slip my project between the layers. I'll get my hand out of the way in a sec, and I'm starting just beyond the halfway mark, that back mark, because when I come back I'm going to go over the top of this. In fact, it's a little bit further along than I'd want. So I'm starting about 1/2 inch away from that center point, and then I'm just going to start stitching. I've got to trust that I've got it all lined up nicely. And obviously if you want to pin this, and in the pattern I show you I've pinned it, but let's go rogue. Just be aware of where your tape is if you're using a ribbon, a label. Oh, I could do with a new needle in this. I can hear it. Now, because we've stabilised the neck edge, it's not going to stretch. But we can stretch the bias if we need to. Can you hear that thumping through? I mean, it is going through a lot of layers. But and I would use a size 12 needle. That's an 80. I'm going a good 1/16 of an inch in, so that means I'll definitely be catching both layers as we go around. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm laying out my fabric nice and straight, and I'm encasing it inside my bias. So folding it over. I think this is the perfect match. Like I say, if you miss at the back, if you miss any, just hand stitch it, glue it. If you're using a fabric glue, it'd be fine. Or just run it under the machine again and just go a little bit further in so you catch it. But we should be okay. You could, of course, use a zigzag. That would definitely catch it. Oh, this is such the perfect batik for this. It's almost like it was made for it. It hasn't got any yellow in, but it's got a yellowy green in. I'm quite happy with that. So just keep encasing your fabric. Like I say, I'm doing a good between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch. You'll see when I'm done. Just make sure that you're encasing your neckline inside that bias. I hope you make one of these. I'd love to see pictures. No, you can't. I know you can't post pictures on YouTube, but you can on Facebook. If you find a suitable post, if you're a member of my gold group, then you got carte blanche. You can post as many pictures as you like. We have a free sort of policy of posting pictures, which is great. If you're not part of my gold group, why not? It's fantastic. They get so much more. My gold ladies get so much more than just these videos. It's amazing. Okay, so we're coming back to where we started. A bit wriggly there, I must admit. So again, just be cautious of your label. If you've put a label in, or even your ribbon, just be cautious that that's needs to be protected, if you like. It's a bit of a rubbish bit of stitching there. I'll try and snip that a bit. Let's see if we can do that. Just release some of those threads. I'm not sure how neat that's going to be, but there we are. I think we'll leave it at that. So out of my 50 inches, I've probably got a good 14 inches spare, which is fine. I'll give you the measurements in the pattern. But what I want you to do is to overlap those two pieces by, well, I would say a good inch. Perhaps, I mean, you could have it, what I've said in the pattern is that you end up with a 2-inch tail. So if we was to cut that off here, that's our 2-inch tail. You can see that, and you can see it there's a picture in the pattern that shows you. But you need to trim that back because 2 inches is too much. So if we trim that back to, let's do an inch. So now you can see that's where I started, and there's my end there. It'll never be exact because obviously with batik I've got the ending here is kind of like a dark purple, here is a lovely green, so you just got to go with it. So now what you can do is pick up your tail and fold that over. Now you might want to use a little bit of quilter's tape there. I'm just going to finger press it and fold that end over, so you've got a nice neat edge. And then you're going to encase your top piece in that folded edge and fold again. Now you might find as you fold things move, you know, make sure that as best you can that all of those are lined up. Another way to have done this is to have kept our start piece open and folded that and encase our end into it. It's something that there's so many different ways of finishing this off, but quite honestly, I'm happy with that. That's absolutely perfect for me. But keep hold of it. You can see I've got my finger on it. I'm not letting it tell me who's boss. I've literally got my finger on that fold. When I've got close to the machine, my stiletto is taking over. If the back slips, which it might well do, just put a hand stitch in it. I'm going to just do a little back stitch, nothing spectacular, because I don't want it to look ugly. So there we are, there's our back. Now none of this is joined, so you can hand stitch that if you want to. Don't machine it, it'll look too clumsy, but it's not going to come undone. And this is, let's just snip those threads, and this is what the back looks like. So let's do it so the label's the right way around. So that's not bad. I'm happy with that. And that's going to go, that's the back of our neck, so we're happy with that. And in actual fact, that could be your guide instead of using a label. If you wanted to, you could put it on the side so it sits on your shoulder. So if you wanted to use that as the front and have it hanging a different way, then why not? So that's how it looks. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is the side seams, and they couldn't be easier. Again, we need to get those pins out. So make sure you've got this so you've got wrong sides together. So let's just turn that through. There we are, I've got it right sides together. Let's do that again. There we go. You might want to give this neckline a press, by the way. I'm so pleased with that batik. It's just amazing how it looks. Now there we are. So that's the neckline. So you can see it's quite a sloppy neckline. Like I say, it doesn't slop so far over that you're going to show your underwear, but it is more of a boat neckline, which I love. And it allows you to wear some jewellery or a scarf if you need to. So there's our neckline. So what we need to do now is to get our sides absolutely sitting parallel on top of each other. So I'm going to work on the overhead now, and I'm going to stand up so I can get this done properly. So this is my side seams here. Again, we could do with giving this a press, but I'll leave it as it is for the moment. So when we look at it, these are our sides, this is our hem, and this is where you would put your bobble trim back and front if you want to. So let's bring some pins in, because we're going to need a few. And all I'm going to do is pin these layers together all the way along here. Again, use your fine pins. You will absolutely pull those threads if you don't. So we're going up about, I don't know, about 18 inches, let's say. Let's say that for accuracy. We're going up 18 inches. Okay, so all we're doing is we're pinning back and front together. So our two side seams, you can see, are sitting on top of each other. So let's move these pins out of the way. We're going to do the same for both sides, but I'll do one side and then I'll go and I'll do the other side. So get your tape measure, or you could use a regular, like a quilting ruler, and you're going to measure in from the side up about this much. So put your tape measure on the edge. Get a pin. Now this is where you might want to adjust. I'm going to give you the bust measurement of where I think this will fit in the pattern, but if you want to make this so it fits a bigger lady, then come out a bit more. I'm going in at 5.5 inches, but you might want to put it at 4, because it just does go near the chest, near the bust line here, okay? So, and on the other hand, if you're slightly slimmer, you might want to come in at 8. Try it at 5.5 first, and then be careful with your stitching. You probably couldn't unpick. I wouldn't like it to unpick. So you can see I'm doing straight pins. And can you also see how I'm just kind of wriggling the pin as I put it in to make sure that I'm not pulling. See, I'm wriggling it just to make sure I'm not pulling that fabric. So now I've got a line of pins going along here. Very happy with this. Let's do it again. And so all my pins, believe it or not, pretty much are in a straight line along there. Okay, so that's where we're going to machine. I'm leaving those pins in. Now you might want to draw a line, which is fine. We can do that. From the bottom edge, you're going to measure up. It tells you in the pattern how much. And pop a pin in there. Okay, make it as straight as you can. I would then also measure in that second line again and get yourself like a crosshatch. So you're actually going to stitch from there up. Oops, nearly did centimetres. And we're going up to the next measurement. I've got bent pins. How did that happen? So my next measurement is here. So you can see I'm just juggling my pin again, so I go through the fibres nicely. And then again we need a crosshatch. Shows you in the pattern. We get a crosshatch because we know the centre of that is where we're going to stitch. And we're going to stitch from that point down to that point. And like I said, if you wanted to, let's get my ruler. If you wanted to, you could draw a line. Be very careful of using a heat erasable pen on any fabrics you've never used before. So that's a bit wonky there. Let's go with the line of the ruler, because you don't want to leave a ghost mark. Okay, so I've done a rough line using my heat erasable all the way along. Now, in normal circumstances, I really wouldn't do that myself, but if you're a novice stitcher, maybe you do want to put your straight line in. But I'm leaving these pins in right to the last minute. When I start here, I'm going to pop my needle in and then take the pins out, but I'm going to put the needle in by hand. Stitch along up here, do a little reverse stitch top and bottom just to secure, and then you have this sort of loose hem here, and you're only going up this far, and this comes right the way over here for your shoulder line. So let's take it to the machine. Let's just get my pins out of the way. Remember, in a little later I'm going to throw my bent pins away, and let's bring the machine in. With this demonstration, I've gone really slowly to allow you to take in each stage. You may do this again quite slowly, but I can assure you it's a lovely easy make and you'll whiz these. So I've got my stitch length on regular 2.4 stitch length, and I'm going to manually put my needle through all the layers. So now my needle is holding all my fabrics. So now I'm going to take my pins out. No way am I going to stitch anywhere near those pins. Foot down. So we're going to do a couple of stitches forward, a couple of stitches back. That's all I'm going to do. Follow your pins or follow your drawn line. Now if you want to, if you're following your pins, you might want to put them at right angles so you can get right up to them and then take them out. Because this garment is very, very fluidy, you'll find it's very, very forgiving in some ways. If you don't quite get your layers right and they're a bit wiggly, you're not going to see it, I promise. So just coming up to that last cross hatch that we did, I'm going to put a little mark, and I'm going to take my pins out. So just coming up to the mark, and then do a little back stitch and cut. Don't make it ugly with lots of back stitching, but you obviously want to anchor that a little bit. So what that has done now is given you kind of like an armhole, and it's given you privacy. That's not going to fly open. People aren't going to see your underwear. We can take the pins out, and you can see you've got a nice big armhole here, really lovely and big. Down to there. I would say, I don't know the measurements, but it's a nice big armhole. And then you've got this privacy piece here. You can see needs a press, and which means if it flies away, because these things do, it's not going to show. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the other side now. So I have finished the other side. I have given it a little press, and we have completed it. I haven't put a pom-pom trim on this one. Firstly, because it's a cotton batik voile, which is slightly heavier than a polyester voile, not much. But I actually wanted to really spend some time finding the right trim for it, so I haven't. But obviously, the idea is that we have a pom-pom trim. So I'll show you my original one in a sec, so you can see what that looks like, and you can see in the pattern. But that's how it looks. So it's quite wide, you can see it's big. You can see what the neckline looks like, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try it on so you can see what it looks like on me. But I'll just stand up now so I can show you the bottom of this one. So you can see the pom-pom trim. You can see I'm 5'4", so you can see it kind of comes between my knee and my hip, so it's a nice length, and you can see how roomy it is. Although it doesn't look like that when you're wearing it, you can look really stylish, have your swimming costume on, and of course you've got that security privacy piece here. Okay, so I'm going to go away and put this one on, the new one on, and then I'll come back to you in a couple of minutes. Be nothing to you, and you'll be able to see this particular finished version. So what do you think? I think it looks amazing, and look at the Amy's that we've got as well. I'm sorry, the Annies that we've got as well to go with it. Really super seaside-y beach theme, beside the pool, all that sort of thing. So there we are. We have now got a cotton batik voile cover up, and you've seen it from step to step, and you know how easy it is. If I stand up, all you're going to see is a mass of fabric, but we'll stand up. There we go, and you can see what it looks like. So you've got the privacy panel here, so nobody's going to be able to see what you're wearing. If you're wearing a t-shirt under there, it gives it a nice drape. You can see how it looks, but also if you wanted to, you could put that pom-pom trim along there like we talked about before. I'm not going to do that with that until I find the right one. I could not find the right one for this fabric. I think I'd probably go perhaps for the lime green. That will look amazing, won't it, with that gorgeous colour. So there we are. So there is our cotton voile cover up. I think it looks amazing. I love this neckline. It allows you to wear the most amazing jewellery if you want to. Sorry if I'm rattling that around, and I think it just is very flattering. That's the main thing, and very comfy. You can have a buffet lunch, and yeah, plenty of room. So there we are. So we've made Amy. I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope you're going to make loads.